The fluorescent lights of Save Mart in suburban Chicago hummed their endless monotone song, casting that particular shade of artificial brightness that made everything look slightly unreal, slightly desperate. Nicole Torres had been standing behind Register 7 for 6 hours straight without a break, her feet screaming in protest against the concrete floor, her back aching from the repetitive motion of scanning, bagging, the endless rhythm of retail that ground people down to numb automatons. The store's air conditioning had broken again, third time this month, and sweat pooled at the small of her back beneath her polyester vest that never quite fit right, never quite felt clean no matter how many times she washed it. It was a Tuesday in late July, the kind of oppressive summer day when tempers ran short and patience evaporated faster than puddles on hot asphalt. Nicole's manager Derek had called in sick, again, leaving the store understaffed during one of the busiest shifts. The line at her register snaked back through the frozen food aisle, frustrated customers checking their watches, sighing dramatically, making pointed comments about terrible service these days. Nicole kept her head down, kept scanning, kept smiling, that professional smile that didn't reach her eyes anymore, the one she'd perfected over 3 years of working retail while putting herself through community college. The man who approached her register looked exactly the kind of customer Nicole had learned to dread. Mid-50s, expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights, designer polo shirt, the kind of casual wealth that screamed, "I've never worked a minimum wage job in my life." He moved slowly, deliberately, blocking the aisle as he examined items in his cart with exaggerated confusion, as if he'd never been grocery shopping. When he finally reached Nicole's register, he didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge her greeting, just started unloading items with the irritated impatience of someone who believed his time was infinitely more valuable than anyone else's. If you've ever had to smile through someone treating you like you're invisible, stay with us. This story will show you why that strength matters more than you know. "Good afternoon, sir," Nicole said, her voice professionally pleasant, despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "Did you find everything okay today?" The man grunted, still not looking at her, focused on his phone. Nicole began scanning his items, organic vegetables, premium cuts of meat, imported cheese, the kind of groceries that cost more than her weekly paycheck. When she reached for a package of steak, he suddenly snapped without looking up. "Be careful with that. It's expensive. Not that you'd know." The comment landed like a slap, but Nicole's smile didn't falter. She'd heard worse. 3 years of retail had given her skin thick enough to deflect casual cruelty, though it still hurt in the quiet moments when she allowed herself to feel it. "Of course, sir. I'll be very careful." She handled each item gently, precisely, her movements efficient despite the tremor of anger and humiliation running through her hands. The man's phone rang, and he answered it immediately, his voice loud and important. "Yeah, I'm stuck in this godforsaken grocery store. The service is terrible. The staff is incompetent. I'll be there when I'm there." He was talking as if Nicole wasn't standing 3 feet away, as if she was furniture, as if her humanity was so irrelevant it didn't warrant basic courtesy. Behind him in line, other customers shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, embarrassed on her behalf, but unwilling to intervene. When Nicole reached the produce, 3 tomatoes that had clearly seen better days, bruised and soft, the man finally looked directly at her. "Those are rotten. Get me fresh ones." His tone wasn't a request. It was a command, the voice of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Nicole glanced at the tomatoes. They weren't perfect, but they weren't rotten. "These are the ones from your cart, sir. But I'd be happy to have someone grab you fresh." He cut her off, his voice rising. "Did I ask for excuses? I said get me fresh tomatoes. Now. Or are you too stupid to understand basic instructions?" The line behind him went silent. That particular kind of silence that happens when cruelty crosses a line. When everyone knows something wrong is happening, but nobody quite knows how to stop it. Nicole felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt the familiar sting of tears she absolutely could not let fall. Not here. Not in front of customers. Not when she needed this job desperately to pay for textbooks and rent and her mother's medical bill. She took a slow breath, the kind her therapist had taught her, and maintained her smile. "I understand, sir. Let me call someone to assist you." She reached for the store phone, but he waved his hand, dismissively. "Forget it. Just ring up what's here. I don't have all day to wait for incompetent staff to do their jobs." Nicole nodded, continued scanning, her movements mechanical now, her mind retreating to that safe place she'd learned to access when customers were particular. The total came to $147.32. The man pulled out his wallet, then seemed to fumble with his credit cards, dropping one on the counter. Nicole picked it up to hand it back to him, and he snatched it from her fingers. "Don't touch my things. Just do your job and ring me up." She processed his payment in silence, the transaction completing with that final beep that should have signaled the end of the interaction. But as she handed him his receipt, he looked at her name tag and spoke one more time, his voice dripping with contempt. Nicole, I'll be sure to mention your terrible service to management. People like you are exactly what's wrong with this company. He walked away, leaving Nicole standing there, hands shaking, smile finally cracking at the edges. The next customer in line, an older woman with kind eyes, reached across the register to touch Nicole's hand gently. Honey, you handled that with such grace. I don't know how you did it. Nicole's voice wavered when she responded. It's part of the job, ma'am. Thank you for being kind. But inside, she felt something breaking. That thin resilience that retail workers build crumbling piece by piece, under the weight of being treated as less than human day after day after day. What Nicole didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the rude customer wasn't just another entitled stranger. He was Marcus Chen, the owner of the entire Save Mart chain, conducting one of his infamous undercover tests, appearing at random stores disguised as a difficult customer to see how staff truly behaved when they thought no one important was watching. And everything that had just happened, every word spoken, every gesture made, had been carefully observed not just by Marcus, but by the security cameras he'd personally reviewed, and the district manager who'd been watching from the office upstairs, taking notes on every interaction. Nicole finished her shift in a daze, her body moving through familiar motions while her mind replayed the encounter, wondering if she really would lose her job, if that awful man really would complain, if her attempts at patience and professionalism had been enough, or if she'd somehow failed in ways she couldn't identify. She clocked out at 9 p.m., her feet barely able to carry her to the bus stop, and rode home through the dark Chicago streets with her head against the window, too exhausted even to cry. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Nicole's apartment in the Logan Square neighborhood was small, a studio barely big enough for a bed, a desk, and a tiny kitchen area, but it was hers, paid for with the money she earned scanning groceries and the occasional catering gig she picked up on weekends. The walls were covered with her community college class schedule, motivational quotes she'd printed from the internet, and a photo of her mother before the cancer diagnosis, smiling and healthy and full of life. That photo reminded Nicole every single day why she worked herself to exhaustion, why she tolerated the use, why giving up wasn't an option no matter how appealing it sometimes seemed. She'd just kicked off her shoes and was heating up ramen when her phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, she'd let it go to voicemail, probably spam, probably someone trying to sell her car insurance she couldn't afford. But something made her answer. Hello? Her voice was hoarse from talking all day, from swallowing emotions that wanted to escape as scream. Is this Nicole Torres? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, this is she. Nicole's stomach tightened with immediate anxiety. Bill. Collector? Hospital calling about her mother? This is Margaret Wu, district manager for Save Mart. I'm calling about an incident that occurred at your store today. Nicole's heart stopped. This was it. She was being fired. That horrible customer had complained just like he'd threatened, and now she'd lose the job she desperately... I can explain, she started, but Margaret interrupted gently. Nicole, I'm calling to inform you that you need to report to the corporate office downtown. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. The address is on your employee portal. Someone will meet you in the lobby. The line went dead before Nicole could ask questions, before she could plead her case, before she could do anything but stare at her phone in numb shock. The corporate office. That's where they fired people who'd seriously messed up, where they handled disciplinary actions too severe for store-level management. Nicole didn't sleep that. She lay in bed running through every moment of the interaction with that terrible customer, trying to identify what she'd done wrong, where she'd failed, how she could have handled things differently. By 4 a.m., she'd convinced herself she was definitely being terminated. By 6 a.m., she'd started searching online for new job lists. By 8 a.m., she was dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a black skirt and white blouse she'd bought from a thrift store for job interview, and heading downtown on the L train, her stomach churning with dread. The Save Mart corporate headquarters occupied 15 floors of a gleaming tower in the kind of building Nicole had walked past hundreds of times but never imagined entering. The lobby was all marble and glass, impossibly clean, with well-dressed people moving purposefully through space while speaking into expensive phones. Nicole approached the security desk, her voice small. I'm Nicole Torres. I was told to report here at 10. The guard checked his list, made a call, then directed her to the elevators. 15th floor. Someone will meet you. The elevator ride felt like ascending to her own execution. Nicole watched the numbers climb. 5, 8, 12, and tried to prepare herself for the worst. She'd need to find a new job immediately. Maybe she could pick up more catering shifts. Maybe she could defer her college semester. Maybe... The elevator doors opened, and Margaret Wu stood waiting, her expression unreadable. She was younger than Nicole expected, maybe 40, wearing a sharp business suit and an ID badge that indicated she was indeed the district manager. "Nicole, thank you for coming. Follow me, please." They walked through corridors lined with offices, past conference rooms where serious-looking people discussed charts and projections, deeper into the building until Margaret stopped at a door labeled Executive Conference Room. Nicole's hands were shaking, her breath coming short. This was worse than she'd imagined. They were firing her in the executive conference room, probably with multiple managers present, probably with security ready to escort her out. Margaret opened the door. "Go ahead in. Someone wants to speak with you." Inside, the room was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. A massive table made of what looked like real wood, leather chairs, everything screaming wealth and power that Nicole had never been close to in her entire life. And sitting at the head of the table was the rude customer from yesterday. Him. The man who'd treated her like garbage, who'd threatened to get her fired, who'd made her shift a living nightmare. Nicole froze in the doorway, confusion and fear warring in her expression. The man stood, and his entire demeanor had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "Nicole, please sit down. I owe you an explanation and an apology." His voice was different too, still authoritative but without the cruel edge. From yesterday. Nicole didn't move, couldn't process what was happening. "I don't understand." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. This will take a few minutes." Nicole sat, perched on the edge of the leather chair like she might need to run at any moment. The man walked to the window, looked out at the city, then turned to face her. "My name is Marcus Chen. I own SaveMart, all 93 stores in the Midwest region. Yesterday I was at your location conducting what we call a character test. I pose as a difficult, rude customer to observe how staff respond when they think no consequences exist, when they believe no one important is watching." He paused, letting that sink in. "You were being tested, Nicole, and you passed in ways that exceeded every expectation I..." Nicole stared at him, her mind struggling to process the information. This whole thing had been a test? The cruelty, the insults, the degradation, all staged? Anger flared hot in her chest. "You did that on purpose? You made me feel like trash on purpose?" Her voice was shaking, years of suppressed frustration bubbling. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be treated that way? To smile through someone making you feel worthless?" Marcus nodded, his expression grave. "I do, actually. I started working in my family's grocery store when I was 14. I've been screamed at, demeaned and treated as invisible more times than I can count. That's precisely why I conduct these tests, because I need to know who my employees really are when things are hard, when customers are cruel, when every instinct is telling them to give up or fight back." He moved closer to the table. "Nicole, yesterday I watched you maintain professionalism and kindness in the face of deliberate provocation that would have made most people quit on the spot or respond with anger. You were patient. You were respectful. You tried to solve my manufactured problems despite me being absolutely awful." He pulled out a folder, opened it. "I also reviewed your employment record. 3 years with SaveMart. Never late. Never a customer complaint that was your fault. Multiple commendations from customers praising your service. Currently enrolled in community college studying business management. Working 70 hours a week between your regular shifts and catering jobs to pay for your education and your mother's medical expenses." He looked up, met her eyes. "You're exactly the kind of person I want representing this company. Not just at the register level, in management." Nicole felt tears burning but forced them back. "What are you saying?" Marcus closed the folder. "I'm saying I want to offer you a position as a junior store manager. Starting salary $45,000 a year plus full benefits including health insurance that will cover your mother's treatments. You'll train under Margaret for 6 months, then take over management of a store in your district. We'll also cover your remaining college tuition. In exchange, I need you to help us train other employees on how to maintain dignity and kindness, even when customers don't deserve it. Because Nicole, that's a rare quality, and it's worth more than you know." Nicole sat in stunned silence, the words echoing in her mind like they were spoken in a foreign language she was only beginning to understand. $45,000. Health insurance for her mother. College tuition a management position. It was so far beyond anything she dared to hope for that her brain simply couldn't process it as, "I don't have a degree," she finally whispered. "I'm not qualified to manage a store. I'm just a cashier." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his posture open, genuine. "Nicole, let me tell you something about qualifications. I can teach anyone inventory scheduling, profit, all the technical aspects of running a store. What I can't teach is character. I can't teach someone to see customers as human beings when they're being treated as invisible. I can't teach the kind of patience you demonstrated yesterday when every fiber of your being probably wanted to walk away or fight back." He leaned forward. "You have something that business schools can't provide. You understand what it means to struggle, to be dismissed, to work yourself to exhaustion, and still show up with kindness. That's leadership, real leadership. Margaret, who'd been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. I was watching the security feed yesterday. After that interaction, you could have complained to other staff, could have vented your frustration, could have treated the next customer with less care because you were hurt. You didn't. You took a breath, steadied yourself, and gave the next person in line the same respectful service you'd attempted to give Marcus. That's professionalism under pressure. That's exactly what we need in management. Nicole's mind spun back to yesterday, to those terrible moments at the register when she'd felt so small, so worthless. But I didn't do anything special. I just tried to get through it without breaking down. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his face into something warm, almost paternal. That's my point. For you, treating people with dignity even when you're being mistreated is so natural, you don't even see it as remarkable. But it is, Nicole. Most of the staff I tested yesterday failed spectacularly. They were rude back. They called for security unnecessarily. They complained loudly to co-workers about that asshole customer while I was still within earshot. Only you maintained grace. He pulled out another document from his folder. This is a formal offer letter. Take it home, read it carefully, think about it. I'm not asking for an answer today, but I want you to understand something. You've been working yourself to exhaustion for 3 years, putting up with abuse from customers and probably not getting nearly enough recognition for your dedication. This company has been lucky to have you. I'd like to make sure we keep you, and that we compensate you fairly for the value you bring. Nicole took the letter with trembling hand. The salary figure jumped out at her. $45,000 annual. More than double what she currently makes. It was enough to move out of the studio, enough to get her mother better care, enough to focus on school without working herself sick. It was enough to breathe. I don't know what to say, she managed. Why me? Why not promote people who've been managers before? Because I don't want managers who've learned to prioritize policy over people, Marcus replied. I want people who remember what it's like to struggle, who see employees as human beings rather than labor costs, who understand that how we treat the most vulnerable people in our stores, customers and staff, defines who we are as a company. He stood, offered his hand. Think about it. Talk to your mother. But Nicole, I hope you'll say yes. The retail industry needs more people like you in positions of influence. The meeting ended with Margaret escorting Nicole back to the elevators, providing her business card, explaining that she could call any time with questions. Nicole rode down from the 15th floor in a daze, emerged onto Michigan Avenue into bright sunlight that felt surreal after the fluorescent world of retail she'd inhabited. She walked to Millennium Park, sat on a bench facing the lake, and finally let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming release of 3 years of pressure suddenly lifting. She called her mother from the park, her voice shaking. Mom, something happened, something impossible. Her mother, weak from treatments but still fighting, listened as Nicole explained everything. Baby, her mother said when Nicole finished. Do you remember what I told you when you took that cashier job? I said kindness is never wasted, even when it feels invisible. She coughed, caught her breath. Someone was watching, Nicole. Someone saw your heart. Now they're giving you a chance to use it to help others. That's not impossible. That's grace. Nicole returned to work that evening. She'd only been excused for the morning meeting, and everything looked different. The same fluorescent lights, the same concrete floors, the same endless line of customers. But now she saw it through new eyes. She saw her coworkers struggling through their shifts, saw customers treating staff with casual cruelty, saw the entire ecosystem of retail's grinding disrespect that she'd been marinating for years. And she understood what Marcus was offering wasn't just personal advancement. It was an opportunity to change that culture for others, to create environments where employees didn't have to sacrifice their dignity for minimum wage. Her supervisor, Derek, who'd finally shown up for his shift, approached during her break. Hey Torres, heard you. Got called downtown. Everything okay? You in trouble? Nicole smiled, a real smile this time. Actually, Derek, everything's about to get a lot better. She didn't elaborate. The offer letter specified she couldn't discuss details until it was officially announced, but she felt something shifting inside her. The helplessness that had defined her existence for years was transforming into purpose. Over the next 3 days, Nicole did exactly what Marcus suggested. She thought carefully about the offer, researching what store managers did, talking to her mother, even reaching out to a former professor from community college for advice. Everyone told her the same thing. This was an opportunity most people would never get, a door opening that she'd be foolish not to walk through. But Nicole also understood the weight of what was being offered. She'd be managing people who were currently her peers, making decisions that affected their livelihoods, representing a company that was trusting her despite her lack of formal credentials. On the 3rd day, she called Margaret Wu. I've thought about your offer. She took a breath, steadying herself. I want to accept, But I need to know something first. Will I be expected to conduct those tests? To treat people badly on purpose? Margaret's laugh was warm. God, no. Marcus does that himself occasionally, and frankly most of us think he's nuts for it. Your job will be to manage with the same empathy you showed during the test. To hire people who might not have perfect resumes but have good hearts. To create a store culture where employees feel valued. Can you do that? Yes, Nicole said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. When do I start? The answer came immediately. Monday. Corporate training for 2 weeks. Then you'll shadow me for 4 months. By Christmas, you'll have your own store. Nicole hung up and looked around her tiny apartment, at the ramen cups in the trash and the medical bills on her desk and photo of her mother smiling before cancer. We're going to make it, she whispered to the empty room. We're finally going to make it. Nicole's first day of management training felt like entering an alternate universe where she was treated as someone whose opinions mattered, whose experience was valuable, whose potential was worth investing in. The corporate training center occupied the 12th floor of Save Mart headquarters, and the cohort of new managers included 3 people with MBA degrees, 2 with prior management experience, and Nicole, the only one promoted directly from an entry-level cashier position without a college degree. The disparity was obvious immediately. During introductions, the others spoke confidently about their qualifications, their career trajectories, their strategic visions for retail management. When it was Nicole's turn, she felt her voice shrink. I'm Nicole Torres. I've been a cashier for 3 years. I'm studying business management part-time at community college. I was promoted because... She trailed off, unsure how to explain the unusual circumstances, without revealing Marcus's testing methodology. Because I was recognized for strong customer service skills. She caught the subtle exchanges of glances among the other trainees, the kind of looks that said, diversity hire, or affirmative action, or whatever euphemism they thought someone didn't belong. Nicole felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rising, but forced it down. She belonged here. Marcus Chen himself had chosen her. That had to count for something. The training was intense. 8 hours daily of operations management, financial literacy, HR protocols, inventory systems, conflict resolution, and labor law. Some of it Nicole absorbed easily. Concepts about customer service and employee relations felt intuitive after years of experiencing both sides of retail interactions. But the financial aspects were brutal. She'd never taken a business math course, had barely passed college algebra, and now she was expected to understand profit margin, shrinkage calculations, labor cost percentages, and complex inventory formula. By the 3rd day, she was drowning. During a session on financial forecasting, the instructor called on her to calculate optimal labor scheduling based on projected sales and legal break requirement. Nicole stared at the spreadsheet projected on the screen, her mind blank, panic rising. I don't know how to... The silence stretched uncomfortably. Someone in the back whispered loudly enough to hear. How did she even get into this program? Margaret Wu, who was observing the session, stood up. Nicole, can I see you outside for a moment? Nicole followed her into the hallway, shame burning through her body. This was it. They'd realized their mistake, realized she wasn't qualified, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy of the opportunity they'd given her. I'm sorry, Nicole said, before Margaret could speak. I'm trying, I really am, but I don't understand the math, and everyone else seems to get it so easily, and maybe this was a mistake. Margaret held up a hand, stopping the spiral. Nicole, stop. Take a breath. She waited until Nicole complied. Do you know why Marcus wanted you in this program? Nicole shook her head, tears threatening. Because he needed managers who understand that retail isn't about numbers on spreadsheets. It's about human beings trying to survive. Yes, you need to learn the financial aspects, and yes, it'll be harder for you than for people with business degrees. But they need to learn what you already know instinctively. How to see employees as people rather than labor costs. How to maintain dignity under pressure. How to lead with empathy. She gestured back toward the training room. Half the people in there will quit within 2 years because they'll get frustrated that real stores with real employees don't behave like their neat business model. But you understand the reality already. The math we can teach you. The heart we can. She pulled out her phone, showed Nicole a tutoring schedule. I've arranged for you to work with our financial analyst 3 evenings. She'll help you with the concepts you're struggling. You're not doing this alone, Nicole. We invested in you because we believe in you. Now, you need to believe in yourself. The tutoring sessions with Janet, the financial analyst, transformed everything. Janet had worked her way up from bookkeeping, understood what it was like to learn business concepts without formal education, and had patience Nicole had rarely encountered in academic settings. You're not stupid, Janet said during their first session when Nicole apologized for asking basic questions. You're learning a new language. Nobody speaks fluent finance without practice. Now let's break these concepts down into pieces that make sense. Slowly, Nicole began to understand labor costs as percentages of revenue, inventory turnover rates, shrinkage, the retail term for theft and waste, break-even analysis. The numbers started forming patterns she could recognize, strategies she could apply. And something else happened too. Nicole began seeing how financial decisions impacted real people. When the training discussed cutting labor costs to improve margins, Nicole raised her hand. But doesn't that mean scheduling fewer employees, which makes everyone's job harder and service worse? The instructor paused. Well, yes, technically. But the goal is optimizing profitability. Nicole pushed back gently. What if we optimized employee retention instead? Wouldn't that reduce hiring and training costs while improving service, which drives sales? The room went quiet. Then Marcus Chen, who'd been observing from the back of the room unnoticed, spoke up. That's exactly the kind of thinking. Nicole, explain your reasoning. She turned to face him, nervous but committed. I worked as a cashier. Turnover in our store was about 40% annually. Every time someone quit, it took weeks to hire and train a replacement. And during that time we were understaffed, which made everyone work harder, which made more people quit. It was a cycle. But if we paid slightly more and scheduled better, gave people consistent hours instead of the unpredictable schedules that make it impossible to have second jobs or go to school, wouldn't people stay longer? She pulled up her own calculations, numbers Janet had helped her compile. $1 more per hour costs about $2,000 annually per full-time employee, but hiring and training a replacement costs about $4,000. Better retention actually saves money while improving service. Marcus smiled, that same warm expression from their first meeting. Nicole just demonstrated something crucial. She's thinking about business problems through the lens of human experience rather than pure abstraction. That's valuable. He addressed the room. You all need to understand that effective retail management requires both financial acumen and emotional intelligence. Some of you have strong analytical skills, but haven't experienced what it's like to work a register for minimum wage. Nicole has lived that reality. Listen to her perspective. It'll make you better manage. The dynamic in the training cohort shifted. The other trainees started seeking Nicole's input on employee-facing policy, asking her opinion on scheduling practices and breakroom conditions, and the 100 small indignities that accumulated into high turnover. And Nicole, in turn, sought their help with financial concepts and operational theories, the expertise they'd gained through formal education. It became collaborative rather than competitive, and Nicole found herself actually enjoying the learning process for the first time since high school. 2 months into training, Margaret took Nicole on her first store visit, a Save Mart location in the south suburbs that was struggling with low morale and high turnover. They arrived during evening shift change, and Margaret immediately began observing. The break room was dingy and crowded, lockers broken, nowhere comfortable to sit during breaks. The schedule posted on the wall showed employees working closing shifts one night, then opening shifts the next morning. Barely 8 hours between punching out and punching back in. Staff looked exhausted, moved with that defeated shuffle Nicole recognized intimately. Margaret turned to Nicole. What do you see? Nicole didn't hesitate. I see people being set up to fail. Look at that schedule. Nobody can sustain that. They're probably calling in sick constantly because they're actually sick from exhaustion. And this break room tells employees they don't matter enough to invest in. She pointed to water stains on the ceiling. That's been leaking for months. Nobody's fixing it because employees aren't a priority. Margaret nodded. You're exactly right. This store has the highest turnover rate in the district and the lowest customer satisfaction scores. The manager focuses only on numbers, cutting costs, maximizing efficiency, without understanding that treating employees poorly costs more in the long run. She met Nicole's eyes. This is going to be your store, Nicole. I'm recommending you take over management here in January. Think you're ready? Nicole looked around at the tired faces, neglected space, the evidence of systematic disregard for human needs. She thought about her 3 years behind a register, the countless shifts where she'd felt invisible and worthless. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. These people deserve better, and I know exactly how to give it to them. Nicole took over as store manager of Save Mart location number 47 on a freezing January morning. Walking through doors she'd never expected to enter as anything other than a customer. The store was exactly as depressing as she remembered from her visit with Margaret. Flickering lights, scuffed floors, a pervasive atmosphere of defeat that seemed to hang in the air like stale smoke. The staff gathered in the break room for her introduction, faces skeptical, bodies language defensive. They'd been through 3 managers in 2 years, each promising change and delivering only more demands for productivity without additional support. My name is Nicole Torres, she began, standing in front of the group, feeling absurdly young and underqualified. 2 years ago, I was working as a cashier at the Logan Square location, making $9 an hour, going to school part-time, and working myself sick. trying to survive. I know what it's like to stand at a register for 8 hours without a break because we're understaffed. I know what it's like to be treated like you're invisible by customers and managers. I know what burnout feels. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm not here to make jobs harder. I'm here to make them survivable. The skepticism didn't fade. Why would it? They'd heard promises before, but something in Nicole's tone made them listen. Here's what's going to change immediately, she continued. First, the schedule. I'm implementing a policy where no one works closing and opening back to back. You'll have at least 12 hours between shifts. Second, we're fixing this break room. I've already submitted the work order. New chairs, fresh paint, fixing that leak, getting a better coffee maker. Third, I'm establishing a fund for emergency expenses. If you have a crisis, car breaks down, kid gets sick, whatever, we'll help. A voice from the back, male, cynical. Where's this money coming from? Corporate's not going to pay for that. Nicole met his eyes. Some is coming from corporate, from a discretionary fund for store improvements. But the emergency fund? That's coming from me personally to start. $200 a month until we can establish something more formal. Because I remember what it's like to have your car break down and know you're about to lose your job because you can't get to work. The room went silent. Then an older woman, Maria, one of the veteran cashiers, spoke up. You're putting your own money in? Why would you do that? Nicole's answer was simple. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it. This is me paying it forward. But here's the deal. I need you all to help me make this store successful. Better service, lower shrinkage, showing up on time when you're scheduled. I can't do this alone. We succeed or fail together. The first month was brutal. Nicole worked 15-hour days, learning the operational side while implementing changes and dealing with the inevitable resistance that came with any new management. Some staff tested her constantly, calling in sick unnecessarily, showing up late, seeing if she'd actually follow through on her promises or crack under pressure like previous managers. But Nicole held firm. She covered shifts personally when needed. She addressed problems immediately, and she kept every promise she'd made. The breakthrough came during a January snowstorm that shut down most of Chicago. Public transit was stopped, roads were treacherous, and Nicole received 6 calls from employees who couldn't make it in for their shifts. The old Nicole would have panicked, would have tried to force people to risk dangerous travel. Instead, she called everyone, scheduled and told them to stay home, then opened the store herself with just 2 employees who lived within walking distance. They served maybe 30 customers that day, but those customers left with stories about the Save Mart, where the manager personally bagged groceries during a blizzard. Word spread, not through corporate communications, but through the organic networks that existed among retail. People started requesting transfers to Nicole's store. Applications for open positions tripled, and something else happened too. The staff who'd initially been skeptical became fiercely loyal. They showed up for shifts. They helped train new employees. They took pride in the store's appearance. When Nicole walked the aisles, she saw people smiling, actually smiling, while they worked. 3 months in, Marcus Chen made an unannounced visit. Nicole was in the back dealing with a delivery issue when her assistant manager found her. There's someone here to see you. Says he's corporate. Nicole's heart jumped. She'd been so focused on day-to-day operations she'd barely thought about how corporate was evaluating her performance. She walked to the front, and there was Marcus, dressed normally this time, watching her staff interact with customers. He smiled when he saw her. Nicole, can we talk in your office? They walked back through the store, and Nicole noticed him observing everything. The clean floors, the organized shelves, the employees who looked engaged rather than defeated. In her small office, Marcus sat across from her, his expression unreadable. I've been reviewing your numbers. Do you want to know what I'm seeing? Nicole braced herself. Yes, sir. Marcus pulled out a tablet, showed her graphs and charts. Labor costs are up 8%. You're spending more on wages than the previous manager. Nicole's heart sank. She'd known the increased pay and better scheduling would cost more, but she'd hoped the benefits would offset it. I know, but Marcus held up a hand. Let me finish. Labor costs are up 8%, but turnover is down 63%. Customer satisfaction scores have increased by 40 points. Sales are up 12%. Shrinkage is down, and the employee satisfaction survey results are the highest in the entire chain. He looked up at her, and his expression was proud. Nicole, you've transformed this store in 3 months. You're proving exactly what I hoped, that managers who understand the human side of retail create better business outcomes than those who only focus on cutting costs. Corporate wants to know if you'd be willing to help train other new managers to share what you're doing. Nicole felt tears threatening. Really? I'm not in trouble for the higher labor costs? You're not in trouble. You're being held up as the model for how we should be operating across the chain. Marcus stood, extended his hand. I took a risk promoting you, Nicole. You've proven it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Keep doing what you're doing, And thank you for showing me that my instincts about character mattering more than credentials were correct. After he left, Nicole sat in her office overwhelmed. She thought about that day almost a year ago, when she'd stood at a register being deliberately degraded, believing she was worthless, invisible, stuck forever in a minimum wage trap. She thought about the choice she'd made to respond with dignity instead of anger, not because she expected reward, but because it was who she'd chosen to be, despite everything trying to break her. Her assistant manager knocked. "Boss, we've got a situation with a customer." Nicole stood, smiled. "Let's go handle it." And as she walked back onto the floor of her store, she felt something she'd never experienced before. She felt like she belonged, not as someone lucky enough to be thrown a bone, but as someone who'd earned her place through years of quiet strength that someone had finally noticed. 2 years after taking over store number 47, Nicole stood in front of 200 SaveMart employees at the company's annual conference, invited to speak about her management philosophy. She looked out at the sea of faces, store managers, district supervisors, corporate executives, and remembered the cashier who'd thought her ceiling was minimum wage and community college classes she could barely afford. That woman felt like a different person, someone from another life. "I was promoted to management because I helped a rude customer," Nicole began, her voice steady. "That customer turned out to be Marcus Chen testing my character. But here's what I want you to understand. I didn't know I was being tested. I responded with patience and dignity because that's who I'd chosen to be after years of being treated. Character isn't something you perform when you think people are watching. It's who you are when you leave no one important can see you." She clicked to her first slide, showing employee satisfaction scores from her store compared to chain average. "When I took over store 47, it had the highest turnover and lowest morale in the district. People were quitting faster than we could hire. Customer complaints were through the roof. On paper, it looked like a problem that required cutting costs and demanding more productivity." She advanced to the next slide. "Instead, I did the opposite. I increased labor costs, gave people better schedules, invested in working conditions, created emergency support system. And within 6 months, this failing store became one of the most profitable in the chain." A hand went up from the audience. A manager from the suburban stores. "But how do you justify increased costs to corporate? Don't they push back on anything that hurts the bottom line?" Nicole smiled. "I showed them that treating employees well doesn't hurt the bottom line. It helps it. Lower turnover saves massive amounts in hiring and training. Happy employees provide better service, which increases sales. Reduced stress leads to less shrinkage and fewer mistakes. When you invest in people, they invest back in the company's success. The math actually works out." She shared story after story. The single mother who'd been chronically late because of childcare issues. Nicole helped her adjust her schedule, who then became the store's employee of the teenager who'd been stealing merchandise to feed his siblings, connected him to social services and worked with him to make amends, who was now studying business in college and still working at SaveMart part-time. The veteran with PTSD, who needed a quieter position and flexible shifts, who'd become their best inventory man. "Every person has a story," Cole said. "Every person is fighting battles we can't see. When we manage with that understanding, when we treat employees as whole human beings rather than interchangeable parts, we create environment where people thrive. And when people thrive, businesses succeed." She paused, emotion creeping into her voice. "I spent 3 years being treated as disposable. I know what that feels like. I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to lead, I'd never make anyone feel that." Marcus Chen gave the closing remarks, and he referenced Nicole's presentation. 2 years ago, I tested a cashier by being the worst customer I could be. That cashier responded with a grace and patience that impressed me deeply. But I didn't promote Nicole Torres because she passed a test. I promoted her because she demonstrated that character under pressure is the most reliable predictor of leadership success." He looked directly at Nicole in the front row. "She's proven that every day since. And she's taught us something crucial. That the most innovative thing we can do in retail isn't about technology or systems. It's about remembering that everyone in our stores, from customers to cashiers, deserves to be treated with dignity." After the conference, Nicole's phone exploded with messages from other managers asking for advice, from employees at other stores requesting transfers, from corporate executives wanting to implement her practices chain-wide. She'd become something she'd never imagined, a voice in retail management, an advocate for a more humane approach to business, living proof that investing in people created value that quarterly reports couldn't fully capture. But the moment that meant the most came 3 months later, when Maria, the veteran cashier from her store, knocked on Nicole's office door. "Boss, you got a minute?" Nicole waved her in, and Maria sat nervously. "I wanted to tell you something. I've been working retail for 23 years. I've had probably 15 different managers, and you're the first one who ever made me feel like I mattered as a person, not just a body filling a shift." Maria's eyes were wet. "My daughter's graduating college. Next month. First person in our family to finish. And she asked me to tell you thank you, because the flexible schedule you gave me meant I could help her with school and work. And the emergency fund you created helped us when her laptop died and we couldn't afford a new. You changed our lives, Nicole. I needed you to know that. Nicole hugged Maria, both of them crying. You deserve all of it. You and everyone else who works hard and never gets recognized for it. After Maria left, Nicole sat at her desk, looking at the photo she kept there, herself in her old cashier vest. Exhausted but smiling. From her last day before the promotion, she kept it as a reminder of where she'd come from, of the grace that someone had extended when she least expected it, of the responsibility that came with being given opportunities others were denied. Her phone rang, Marcus's assistant, saying he wanted her to join a corporate initiative redesigning training program for the entire chain. Nicole accepted immediately, because she understood something fundamental now. The test that day at Register 7 hadn't been about whether she deserved promotion. It had been about whether Marcus's theory was correct, that character mattered more than credentials, that people who'd experienced struggle managed better than only studied it, that investing in unlikely candidates created extraordinary results. She'd proven his theory correct, but more than that, she'd proven something. To herself. That worthiness wasn't something you earned through suffering, but something you claimed by refusing to let suffering define you. That responding to cruelty with dignity wasn't weakness, but the rarest kind of strength. That being seen, really seen, by someone who recognized value the world overlooked, could open doors you'd never dared approach. Nicole logged off her computer, locked her office, and walked through her store one last time before heading. She watched her employees, interacting with customers, saw the care they took, heard laughter from the break room, noticed the pride people took in their work. This was the ripple effect of one choice made 2 years ago, one decision to maintain humanity when every instinct said to protect yourself or give up. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that character matters, that people are watching even when you think they're not, that choosing kindness in hard moments can unlock futures you can't imagine. We all face tests we don't recognize as tests, moments where how we treat others defines who we're becoming. Nicole Torres passed her test, not because she wanted reward, but because she'd chosen to be better than her circumstances. And that choice changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone whose life she touched afterward. Be the person who sees. Be the person who maintains dignity when it's hardest. That's how we change the world. One interaction at a time. One choice at a time. One person deciding that kindness matters even when cruelty seems easier.